Keene, with help from Jeff Kynock. I'm Paul Habertrud. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to CBC Radio 1. CBC, always here for Canada.
Here's to the bold. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it. We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. It's news you can trust, delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1.
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're at minus 25 with an extreme cold morning in downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. The police watchdog is investigating after a crash overnight sent 2 people to hospital. It happened around 11:30 last night at Chief Peguis Trail and Henderson Highway. Winnipeg police say officers in a marked cruiser spotted a vehicle speeding on Henderson near Johnson. But when they tried to get it to stop, it took off and rear-ended a different car. Police say the passenger ran off but was caught by officers nearby. The driver was trapped and had to be freed from the car by paramedics. They were taken to hospital for treatment. The IIU is investigating because of injuries sustained by the driver. A proposal clearing the way to build affordable housing next to the Granite Curling Club passed a key vote at Winnipeg City Hall today. The plan has ignited a battle between members of the club and housing advocates. The CBC's Cameron McLean explains.
Earlier this month, the Property Committee split the vote on a plan to subdivide and rezone the parking lot next to the Granite Curling Club. The city owns both the club and the lot. It wants to separate the two in order to build a 111-unit affordable housing building. The club's board says the plan threatens their future because the loss of parking would lead to curlers choosing other locations to play. They would also lose out on money from renting the spaces during the day. The Executive Policy Committee passed a motion approving the subdivision and rezoning of the lot. But they included a requirement for city staff to work with Granite executives and the developer to support the sustainability of the club. The plan still needs approval from council. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The latest inflation numbers are out this morning, and they show the inflation rate was on the rise last month. It reached 1.9%, up from 1.8% in December. Peter Armstrong has more.
This is the first time in 3 months that we've seen prices accelerate again. It's largely as economists had been expecting. Higher gasoline prices and mortgage costs came in heavier than that GST tax holiday, and overall that drove prices up. The core measures that the Bank of Canada is always watching, those also accelerated. But if you zoom out a bit, those are cooling too on a 3-month average. Inflation's back on the tips of everyone's tongue right now, if only because of the looming threat of a trade war with the United States. If the U.S. imposes tariffs, that'll slow demand and likely drive prices down. But if the Canadian government responds with its own tariffs, that would likely drive prices up for consumers in this country. We'll hear again from the Bank of Canada in 3 weeks' time. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
And among the provinces, Manitoba posted the largest jump in inflation last month. Inflation here rose 2.7% from 1.1% in December. The province's gas tax break ended in January, sending prices up 14 cents a litre. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other senior U.S. officials met today with a Russian delegation in Saudi Arabia. Rubio says the two countries have agreed to reestablish diplomatic relations and will be working together on a plan to end the war in Ukraine. The meeting is being criticized by Ukrainian and European leaders who say they're being left out. Ukrainians in Winnipeg are equally concerned. Nick Kravitz has family in Ukraine.
There's a narrative in Ukraine that anything about us, without us, is unacceptable. So talking about Ukraine, talking about its sovereign territory, what Ukraine may have to give up or concede to Putin, who has launched this invasion, nobody is saying what Putin must give up or what he may concede in order for these talks to start. So that is very worrisome.
Gravitz says Ukraine can't give up territory to Russia because it sends a message to autocrats around the world that they can swallow up their neighbors using force. With more pink slips to come, hundreds of government employees across dozens of U.S. agencies were fired over the weekend by Elon Musk and his so-called Department of Government Efficiency. Cameron McIntosh has the latest from Washington.
Right now, a lot of the people being let go are probationary employees who have been on the job less than 2 years, and some with very similar stories. Many are just getting form emails just saying they're done, like Elizabeth Aniskovich, who was a lawyer at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
I have no information about exactly how long my health insurance will continue. And there's just a lot of questions about what we are supposed to do next to take care of ourselves.
Now, the administration says it's seeking to cut up to 10% of the federal workforce. It's going at a really fast pace, and some departments are having trouble even tracking it. Take the National Nuclear Security Administration. It started cutting staff until it was realized it was firing some of the people that monitor the U.S. nuclear weapons stockpile. So now it's trying to hire many back. Elon Musk has said mistakes will be made, but is offering very little in the way of accountability. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Washington.
And finally, Leonard Peltier has been released from prison in Florida. The Indigenous activist spent nearly 50 years in prison for the murder of 2 FBI agents in 1975. His sentence was commuted by then-President Joe Biden in the final hours of his presidency. For many, Peltier's imprisonment has symbolized systemic injustice for Native Americans. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, you can head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can use the CBC News app. In Winnipeg, we have that extreme cold warning, a high of -21 and mainly sunny today with wind at times. Brandon, extreme cold, a high of -24 and sunny. Dauphin, extreme cold, a high of -21 and sunny. In Flin Flon, mainly sunny, a high of -20. Churchill, a mix of sun and cloud, and a high around -17 degrees. You're listening to CBC Radio 1.
Good afternoon and welcome to Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten. On this extremely cold day, there's even an extremely cold warning out there, as you just heard from Matt. Right now it's -26, but we're going to rock it up to, what did he say, -21, something like that. Well, coming up on the show today, it's I Love to Read Month. But in the midst of that, there's a war on. It's the reading war, and it's a debate about how students should learn to read. And on the program today, we want to hear from you. How did you learn to read? And what do you think is the best method to teach kids to read? Is it phonics? Is it some other way of doing things? In the Evergreen School Division, they are doing things differently. We want to hear from you about that too. But first up, the brother of a man charged with attacking a Winnipeg pastor says he warned medical staff not to discharge his brother from hospital, but they did. The older brother of a man charged with attacking a Winnipeg pastor with a knife says there were signs his brother was not ready to be discharged from hospital. The man, whom CBC is not naming because he's concerned about his own and his brother's safety, says weeks before the attack he received concerning text messages from his brother. After receiving those messages, he warned a doctor and nurses that his brother was going to harm someone and begged them not to discharge him. But they did. He shared what those messages said with the CBC's Zubina Ahmed.
Here's the text message that he actually sends me. Do you know why I am in the hospital? Because I hear voices to kill a priest to save my own life. I feel I am threatened and my life is in danger. After that message, I actually called Health Sciences because I freaked out. I mean, stuff like that, you'd always take seriously. So I called, as soon as I spoke, I read the message, the nurse in charge, and I said, look, this is the message I got from my brother. He's hearing voices. I read the whole message. He's threatening to kill a priest. I don't know what he's been telling the physicians, the medical team at the Health Science Center Mental Health. I didn't know that, but I want to make sure that at least I do my part and let them know about it. And she said, I got the message. I will let the physician, the psychiatrist, or the medical doctor know about this. Then 2 days later, I get another text from him saying, I just met with the doctor. I told her I feel threatened. When I leave the hospital, I will murder someone in self-defense. And then a moment later, he said, good news, they're letting me out. That day, when I heard that they're going to let him out, I called again. It was 2 days later after the initial call, and I spoke with another nurse, and then I asked to talk to the doctor. And she said, I'll pass this message to the doctor, and someone will call you. Well, no one called me. So an hour and a half later, at 4:45, I called again. This is my third time, and I spoke with a different nurse, and I said, look, he cannot be let go. He's unstable. He's sick. He needs help, and he is a danger to society. And he says, you know what? Okay, we know about this, but let me see if I can talk to the doctor. And I actually got a physician on the line. I read the message again, and I said, are you guys letting him out? And this is what she responded to me. Quote, he was able to fill out all the forms correctly and has been through the system many times. He has been admitted 6 or 7 times here. And I said, he's unstable. He's danger to the society. Can you guarantee that he will not hurt anyone or kill a priest? And there was silence. She didn't respond. He's had a long history of mental illness. Even the physician, the medical doctor who I spoke with, she said they knew him. He's been admitted 6 or 7 times. He was just a number for these people. And they still let him go. Now you tell me how that is right.
What are your memories of him as a brother?
He was a very good person. Good person. He got into drugs and had mental issues and ran into law, and that's where things turned for the worse. But he was a good person. My brother, just like everybody else, just hard work. He went to school, went to college. He was living with my mom and then went to Europe for many years. And he just came back from Europe not long ago. And he was now actually living for a few days with my mom and then moved to a shelter.
And what about your mother? How is she dealing with all of this as a family?
My mom is absolutely crushed. She's absolutely devastated. She has tried to help him for years and years and years. It's absolute tragedy for everyone. I mean, we're absolutely devastated. I feel so bad for the priest. I feel bad for the people who are at the Mass. It's a tragedy. It's horrible for all of us, everyone involved. But also it's a tragedy that our healthcare system failed him. I mean, someone could have died. I mean, that could be you on the street. It could be your mom or your kids. You never take those threats easily. And he had a plan, and they knew about it. I called one nurse. I called second time. Then I called third time, and they knew they still let him go.
What do you want next?
I want him to get help. I want the courts to force him to be on medication. I said many times, you need to be on medications. Nowadays, with current medical field, there's help for almost everyone. And I know that he has refused that, but hopefully the courts will look at this and force him, because once he's on medication, he will stabilize. He will see the world like you and I, and he can make the right choices. He needs to pay the price, and the courts need to do the justice. But at the same time, above all, I want him to get help so he can be healed. My brother is mentally ill, and he is, to some extent, also a victim of many circumstances, and also, above all, is a failed Canadian medical system, because they let him go. He's not just a number. And I want to make sure that we can prevent tragedies like that in the future, because there will be more people like him. But we need to look at the system. I would like the health minister to look at this and say, why was this tragedy happen? Where did we fail? And why was this person allowed to be there? And how do we prevent anything like that in the future?
Police said in a news release last week that the pastor was able to escape unharmed. CBC reached out to Shared Health, the agency that oversees Health Sciences Centre, for comment. It would not say whether it is investigating the man's release. However, it did say that in general, quote, discharge is based on the assessments and ongoing treatment needs of each patient as deemed appropriate by the treating physician psychiatrist. End quote. In a statement sent to CBC, Health Minister Uzuma Azaguera called the incident, quote, alarming and a terrifying experience for all those present, end quote. They wouldn't comment on the man's mental health care. More of this story can be found on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Breaking this hour, CBC News brings you all the local, national, and international news you need to make sense of your world.
I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement.
Now's your chance to enjoy a free preview of Canada's source for breaking and live news.
The air raid sirens went off.
Find out why more Canadians choose CBC News Network over any other Canadian news channel. The CBC News Network free preview on now.
You're listening to Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoog-Stratton. You're at 89.3 FM, 990 AM. Coming up on our call-in portion of the show, it's I Love to Read month, and I'd like to hear from you. What we're talking about today is that if you love to read, how do you do it? How do you teach kids to do it? Because one Manitoba school division is taking on what they're calling the reading wars head on and introducing a phonics-based way of reading to teach students to read, which is different from what they tend to use these days. We'll hear how it's different from what's being offered now. We want to hear from you. How did you learn to read? Was it phonics? Was it something else? And give us a call, 204-780-0893. And coming up in just a minute, good news for Gimli. Sail Canada has named it the host for the Sail West Championships this July, and we'll find out how that's going to help build and support the Gimli sailing community and the wider town. That should be nice. The sailing's okay now if you have one of those windsurfer kind of sails, but this is the kind on the water in the summer. Taking a look at Riley's forecast today. In the Winnipeg region, he says, mainly sunny today. Highs of minus 21 and down to minus 27 tonight. Some temperatures in Brandon, it's minus 30. Churchill is the hot spot at minus 18. Dauphin minus 26. Gimli minus 23 with those sailing days coming. Paul minus 25. Thompson minus 21. Winnipeg, it's minus 26 degrees. As I was saying, good news for Gimli. The town's yacht club has just been named host to Sail Canada's Sail West Championships. That's coming up this July. Gimli's is one of the largest sailing clubs on the prairies and attracts sailors from around the world for its size and challenging waves. Charlie Burns is the regatta co-chair of Sail Canada 2025 and a member of the Gimli Yacht Club. He's been sailing with the club since 1970, and he spoke earlier with the CBC's Chloe Friesen.
Hi, Chloe. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad there's some interest when it's, minus 20 outside right now?
Yeah, no, sailing really isn't the first thing that comes to mind in this weather. But Gimli now is named host to Sail Canada's Sail West Regional Championships. What does this mean?
Well, it's just a fantastic honor. It is Gimli has been the center of sailing in Manitoba, I think, as you know, since 1967. And it's just got this terrific legacy. Over 25 national and international regattas have been hosted there since 1967. And this is just another one. And it's great to see it come to fruition this summer.
How did you feel when you found out Gimli would be playing host?
Oh, it was just fantastic. It's we've been really trying to promote Gimli, and it's the 10th largest freshwater lake in the world, bigger than Lake Ontario. I mean, it is a fantastic venue. I sometimes refer to it as a fantastic stadium. And it's a world-class stadium. I mean, we've had 2 Pan Am games. We've had a world championship there. We have many Olympic coaches and athletes who have come from Manitoba because we have such a world-class facility in Gimli.
So this is just another addition to that long list of events and uses of Lake Winnipeg.
Absolutely, and I can remember I was involved in the World Windsurfing Championships, and we had over 240 athletes from 42 different countries come to Gimli, and actually one marriage resulted out of it to a New Zealander. So there you go.
So maybe this is a good place for love to happen, a good potential place to meet people.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me more, Charlie, about the sailing community in Gimli? How big is it right now?
Well, it grew in 1965. It didn't exist, and the '67 Pan Am Games started it. And since that time, there's about 100 and I think it's 110 boats are members of the club. Probably about 160 sailors, and it's really just a tremendous facility on an amazing lake.
How did it get started? Can you explain a bit of the background?
Well, they with the Pan Am Games in '67, they needed a world-class venue, and the Royal Canadian Air Force actually had a big base in Gimli. And they actually had a waterfront area where they actually conducted rescues for any jets that happened to fall in the lake. And they also had a sailing club. And in fact, my brother's father-in-law was one of the last commanders of the base. And he was actually the honorary commodore of the RCAF club. So there actually has been a club there in some forms even prior to 1967.
Now, Charlie, before I continue, I just want to know about sailing in your own life. You've been doing it for a while. You mentioned you windsurfed as well. How do you feel when you're out on Lake Winnipeg sailing?
Oh, well, I don't want to do anything else other than sail because it's so neat. Sailing is environmentally friendly. You're not spending anything on gas. You don't have to worry about Trump's 10% tariffs, and it's a tremendous sport. It's a lifetime sport. I was thinking about that before the interview, and I as a kid I was involved in sailing, and I hate to say it, but I'm getting on now, and I am still involved in sailing, and it truly is a lifetime sport, and that's what is amazing about it, actually.
Now, you don't need any fuel per se to sail, but you could call sailing maybe fuel for the economy in Gimli. How much of an impact does sailing have, and does an upcoming event like this, what impact could it have on the economy of Gimli itself?
Well, we've estimated the economic impact of the club being in Gimli. It's well over $2 million a year to the local economy, and an event like Sail West will draw well over 150 athletes, coaches, managers to the event, which is untold hotel stays and expenditures that occur. So it's great for the economy, and it's great for the tourism. In fact, the Gimli site, when it's full of 50, 60 boats, is quite a neat venue.
I can only imagine what that'll look like. Now, Charlie, I want to end here with looking kind of to the future of the Gimli Sail Club. Another announcement was made recently with the Gimli Sail Club in Sail Canada. You're establishing a new national training center. How significant is that?
Oh, it's very significant. We've been working on that for years. The national team recognizes what a major facility it is. It really is. There's nothing like Gimli in Western Canada, and even some of us would argue that although British Columbia has some beautiful harbors, Gimli certainly has wonderful weather and great waves. So, but it is a fantastic venue, great for training, and so we're very excited, and there's lots of development that will come because of that.
So we could see some potentially Olympic hopefuls come out of Gimli?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm sure we're gonna talk again as we get closer to this big event. But I appreciate your time.
Well, that's great, and just remind your listeners, it's July 17th to 20th is when Sail West will be happening. So it'll be hope to see everybody there. Perfect. on that weekend.
We'll talk to you then, Charlie. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chloe.
Charlie Burns is the regatta co-chair of Sail Canada 2025 and a member of the Gimli Yacht Club.
Manitoba is the kind of place that draws you in. Every day it's growing, it's changing. Just when you think you've got it figured out, though, there's something new to understand. I'm Marcy Marcusa, host of the CBC Daily Podcast. This is Manitoba. I've covered the news from the rail line in Churchill to the border in Emerson, and it's talking about the local stories that help us understand this place. That's what This is Manitoba is all about. Find it on CBC Listen or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Being Black in Canada, a space for news, documentaries, arts, and more. Celebrating a uniquely Canadian perspective on Black issues with the cultural moments that matter to Black Canadians. Visit cbc.ca/Being Black in Canada.
You're listening to CBC Radio Noon. It's 26 minutes after 12 o'clock. Well, here's a cover song with a twist. Mitchell McCoons has recorded his own version of Bill Withers' Ain't No Sunshine, with the lyrics flipping between English and Ojibwe. Mitchell says it's a reflection of what he heard growing up in a bilingual household where his grandma would switch between languages mid-conversation. Here's Ain't No Sunshine.
Kawin makuam siyapi enende Kawin gujia siyapi enende Kawin makuam siyapi enende She's always gone too long Magico api manja I wonder this time where she's gone. I wonder if she's gonna stay. It ain't no sunshine when she's gone. This house just ain't no home. And Magico, I be my judge. Nigi them, I know. Nigi them, I know. Nigi them, I know. Nigi them, I know. Hey, gotta leave your thing alone. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. Kawin makuam siyapi only darkness every day. Kawin makuam siyapi enende, and she's always gone too long. Anytime she goes away, nigi Said, hey, go living on day alone. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone.
Out of Brandon, that was Mitchell McCoons with a bilingual spin on the great Bill Withers song, Ain't No Sunshine. And coming up after the 12:30 news, we return to Gimli because it's I Love to Read week, but there seems to be a war on when it comes to learning to read. Should you teach kids to read by phonics or by that whole looking at the word kind of thing? The science is in, opinions are divided, and we want to find out from you. What do you think is the best way to teach kids to read? Give us a call, 204-780-0893, and tell us what you think. You're listening to Radio Noon. The news is next.
This is CBC News. At 12:30, we're at minus 23 with an extreme cold warning in downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. The mayor of Winnipeg and his inner cabinet have approved a controversial plan to allow affordable housing to be built beside the Granite Curling Club. The plan has pitted club members against housing advocates. Today, the Executive Policy Committee gave the green light to a subdivision and rezoning of the Granite's parking lot. Mayor Scott Gillingham, says the approval requires city staff to work with Granite executives and the developer to support the club's future.
I am very confident there will be curling at the Granite Curling Club for many years to come. I want to see that. Our staff will do all they can to ensure that we get to a place where we can find a solution that works for everybody, to have the housing, to have the parking needed for the Granite Curling Club so the operations of the club are not impacted.
The plan still needs approval from council. The United States and Russia are taking steps toward reestablishing diplomatic ties, and that includes holding preliminary discussions on ending the war in Ukraine. They began today in Saudi Arabia with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. But so far, there's no indication Ukraine will be involved in those talks. Crystal Gamansing explains.
We're going to appoint our teams respectively to work very quickly to reestablish the functionality of our respective missions.
That reconnection, according to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, was the first of 4 points agreed to by the U.S. and Russia.
The second point is that we're going to appoint a high-level team from our end to help negotiate and work through the end of the conflict in Ukraine.
Yuri Sak, a Ukrainian government advisor, says Ukraine won't accept a deal penned by Russia and the U.S. in isolation.
We just know that Russians cannot be trusted, and this is why the security guarantees that Ukraine must receive as part of this process are very, very key.
The UK has said it would be ready and willing to send British troops to Ukraine to ensure enduring peace. But Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov says NATO or troops under any flag on the ground in Ukraine would be completely unacceptable. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
And finally, among the provinces last month, Manitoba posted the largest jump in inflation. Inflation here rose to 2.7% from 1.1% in December. The province's gas tax break ended in January, sending prices up 14 cents a litre. Nationally, Canada's inflation rate rose to 1.9% in January. Statistics Canada says this upward turn would have been worse had it not been for the federal government's GST holiday. The tax break started in the middle of December and ended over this past weekend. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Matt.
Back soon.
Say, Matt, listen, have you gone yet?
Hello. No, hi. Yes,
listen,
hi there.
I know you're a big reader, but do you remember learning to read and how that went for you? Because that's what we're talking about on the call-in.
Mrs. Laithwaite.
Mrs. Laithwaite, yes.
In grade 2. Mm-hmm. Very big on phonograms.
Phonograms.
which were like a type of phonics
Oh, yeah.
reading to learn. But what it was a series of flashcards.
Right.
She would hold up to the class.
Yeah.
And you had to do them. And then you had to take flashcards home and do them with your mom and stuff. But it was the flashcards would say like TH.
Yeah.
And you have to make the noise it made.
Oh,
and L or like
Yep.
EL and the noise. So it was all about learning the different noises, the letter combinations
And it served you well.
make. I think so.
Yeah, you're doing a fine job so far.
I mean, there are a couple tricky ones out there still.
That's true. The exception.
Vexicological,
Oh, yes, vexicological. I've always had a problem with that.
as has every other news person.
Is
How
that?
did you learn to read?
Same thing. My mom was actually a grade 1 teacher.
Oh.
And my dad studied these, I don't know, psychology of learning or something like that. So my
Cool.
flashlight, why do I get stressed at the size? Even recipe cards stress me out now because of flashcards. What's that sound? What's that sound? What's that sound? But yeah, I learned to read.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure we did.
I'm sure we did. I'm going to ask Riley now, too. Thanks,
Sue.
Matt. All right. How about you, Riley? You young thing. How did you learn to read?
Oh, it was probably in grade 1.
Yeah.
Kindergarten, one of those two.
Yeah.
Don't quite remember that.
Sitting
but-
in a circle
Yes.
on those little chairs. Yeah.
On the carpet in the
On the
elementary
carpet.
school. Yeah.
Well, and now you skillfully can read us the forecast.
Which I'm not sure a lot of people are a fan of.
Yeah, maybe not. Sound out those words.
Yeah. It will get better if you're not a fan of the very cold weather that we've had.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been trying to point this out over the last week or so. It has been really good for things like the river trail, any of the outdoor rinks. This has been good weather to keep that ice
Yes.
in really good shape.
Empty of people, but
Well,
there's
I know.
lots of ice.
But I guarantee you, though, by the time we get to the weekend, I think the river trail is going to be packed.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at a very significant warm up. Get this, minus 23 in Winnipeg right now, minus 29 in Brandon, Melitta's at minus 28. By the time we get to Sunday and into Monday, we're looking at temperatures +2, +3.
Mm-hmm.
So a full 25 degrees warmer than it is right now.
That's going to hurt.
For some of us. I know. It's going to be, I think, a shock to the system a little bit. But you know what? It had to warm up sooner or later.
We're ready for it.
I think a lot of people are ready for it. Yeah, 23 below with the wind chill, feeling closer to minus 35 in Winnipeg right now, still feeling closer to minus 40 in the Westman region. I think we've got one more night of extreme cold warnings here in southern Manitoba before we start to see that lifting. I don't remember what my weather map looks like without the extreme cold warning on it at this point because it's been in place for so long across much of Manitoba, including the Parkland into Westman. So the polar jet stream, that polar vortex, is going to start receding back to the North Pole. That's been aided in part by an area of high pressure over Saskatchewan. So that's kind of been like this double whammy that's kept us cold and then ultra cold as we've gotten through the next couple days here. That does start to recede. Things start to shift around a little bit. That's going to allow the jet stream to push a little bit further north and allow us to get back onto the warm side of it. So some warmer Pacific air. With that comes a better chance of some flurries, some snow, some cloud cover. So not as sunny by the time we get to the weekend, but certainly looking at temperatures quite a bit warmer than we are right now. Minus 21 this afternoon in Winnipeg. Looking at minus 20s through south central Manitoba. High of minus 23 in Brandon. Thompson looking at a mix of sun and clouds and minus 16 this afternoon. Minus 17 in Winnipeg tomorrow. Minus 15 for Thursday. Minus 7 for Friday. Up to 0 by the time we get to Sunday.
That's good news, Riley.
There you go.
Thank you.
I hope I was able to give a little bit of hope.
Those are words that we like to read on the page and hear from your lips alone. Thank you so much,
You're
Riley.
welcome.
That's weather specialist Riley Lachuk, and you can hear him this afternoon on Up to Speed from 3 to 6, or you can see him on TV at 6 o'clock on CBC News at 6. You're listening to Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten, and it's 22 minutes before 1 o'clock. It is I Love to Read Month, and we want to hear from you, as we heard from Matt, how you learn to read, and what you think is the best way to teach kids to read. Give us a call at 780-0893, or you can text me at 204-588-78. Or wait a second, 7355. Yeah, text. I can't read that part. 204-588-7355. And tell us how you learn to read, what you think is the best method to learn to read. And maybe you remember sitting around in that little circle with your teacher on the tiny little chair. But starting off, we want to talk about the simmering debate about the best way to teach children to read. And it's actually been called the Reading Wars. It's a decades-long debate about how students should learn to read. And one Manitoba school division is leading the charge to change up their approach based on phonics. Scott Hill is the superintendent of Evergreen School Division in the Gimli area. As I mentioned, we also want to hear from you. How did you learn? Was it a good or a bad experience for you or maybe your kids or your own students? And what do you think is the best approach? So if you have a story about that breakthrough moment when it all started to make sense, or if you're a parent, teacher, or reader with an opinion about the best way to teach kids to read, give us a call at 204-780-0893, or you can text 204-588-7855. And we have Scott by Zoom. Hello.
Hi there, Lori. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So, Scott, I understand there are two main approaches or schools of thought on how students should learn to read. And let's start with what we might call the method in use for the past while, or balanced literacy. Is that what's going on right now? And can you explain it?
I can do my best. This is very contentious to try to explain these two sort of points of view. And, off the top, you described these as reading wars, and maybe that's language that would be more appropriate south of the border for how this debate plays out.
Really? I would
but
agree.
Here in Manitoba, it's mostly a whole lot of teachers and a community of educators trying our best to do right by our students and learn the best ways to teach reading. So balanced literacy has been an approach that's been in place for a number of years and really kind of grew out of a whole language movement that some of your listeners might be familiar with. And really founded on the premise that kids learn to read, or people learn to read by taking cues from the text and using sort of context clues to figure out what the words are, and to derive meaning from that. So that's kind of a short summary of balanced literacy.
What do you mean, like cues like what?
Yeah, so when students are learning how to read, they might take into account, is there a picture? What are some of the other things that are going on in the story while you're reading? Sometimes it might include what's the first letter of the word. You might try out a word to see if it makes sense in the context of the story that you're reading. In which case sometimes you might use the word horse and the word might say pony, but some might argue that the difference in meaning isn't significant, and others might argue that is significant. So that's sort of balanced literacy in short.
Okay. Now, I think you're an advocate for what's called structured literacy. What is that?
Yeah, so we're taking an approach that we call structured literacy. Sometimes people use the term the science of reading. We prefer structured literacy, and that's more taking into account, as Matt shared when you were talking to him about how he learned to read, phonics, and paying attention to the sounds that the letters make in the way that they appear within words. And so that's sort of a base for us and foundational for us. So we think that we need to teach some of that explicitly and directly, phonics, and then as kids learn to decode words and lift words off the page, as they say, then we also want to teach meaning through vocabulary instruction that's also direct and explicit, and provide lots of background knowledge for students so that they can understand what they're reading.
So if we're talking about what phonics is called, is it phonics or structured literacy is the science of reading? Is there science around reading? And if not, does that not define which method would be the most efficacious for teaching children to read? How does that, where's the crux of this debate here?
There does seem to be a growing research base around what people call the science of reading, and the idea that it's very important for kids to learn some of these foundational pieces around phonics and the sounds of letters and decoding skills early on in their experience. So that's reflected in, for example, the Human Rights Inquiry in Ontario, which came up with a right to read report and recommended that schools take up an instructional stance that includes structured literacy. And similarly, Saskatchewan has had a similar human rights inquiry that released some similar findings. There's also been advocacy from the Canadian Pediatric Society and Manitoba pediatricians as well, asking the education community to be attentive to this research that tells us that kids really need to develop this sound foundation around decoding and what kind of is commonly referred to as phonics.
Well, we're interested in hearing from our listeners, too, about how they learn to read. Or did they learn by phonics or by some other method? And also what that experience of learning to read was like. Give us a call at 204-780-0893 and tell us what you think is the best way for children to learn to read. And Scott, I want to ask you also, is one method sort of considered less anxiety producing or more anxiety producing? Like one seems more, is one more sort of student driven and the other rote and teacher? Where does the divide come?
Well, I think that phonics instruction got a bad rap for a lot of years because people associated it with maybe some old teaching methods or maybe some mannerisms from teachers in an era that's long gone by now. And so maybe if it's sometimes associated with what they would say is like drill and kill or rote learning or these negative terms. But I mean, that's really far from the way our teachers approach learning in any kind of case. We try to make learning something that's enjoyable and fun and doesn't have a lot of anxiety in it. Of course, the most worrisome source of anxiety that I would think about would be what it's like to be a kid who's gotten beyond grade 3 and is really struggling to read in a classroom or in a world that really asks for people to be able to have some sound literacy skills. So that's an anxiety and that's a stress that I think we really need to make sure that we protect kids from by making sure that they have those strong foundational skills in the first place.
And how do those foundational skills look these days? Because people learn in so many different ways. How is the material best presented so that children can be literate by grade 3?
Yeah, we use a sort of a model for instruction in our school division that's called tiered instruction, which means we deliver instruction to all the kids initially. And that would be done in this case through helping kids know what the sounds are that are associated with different letter combinations. And sometimes that can be sort of the call and answer, choral response, kind of sing-song back and forth between a teacher and a group of kids. So if you see a grade 1 class or a kindergarten class or a grade 2 class doing this, you can tell that kids are kind of enjoying this group experience that they have where they're, giving a choral response back to the teacher, sounding out the words all together in a joyful way. So that's sort of tier 1 instruction for everyone. Now, not all kids sort of pick it up the first time. And so we make sure that we have a second tier of instruction where we provide additional help for kids that might be struggling to get some of that foundational learning. And then we also have a tier 3 where we provide one-on-one support to kids that really need more opportunities and more repetition in order to develop those foundational learnings. And that's all really based on researched understanding of challenges in reading, dyslexia, and other developmental challenges.
And in the classroom, the teachers, they, become teachers and they're taught in university a way to teach children to read. So how will this be implemented? Would it be just at the classroom level now? How are you going to implement it in Evergreen? Like, what's the plan?
Yeah, so we've begun implementation. I guess this is our second year of implementation. We spent a few years doing a lot of learning and talking with teachers, doing professional learning, providing what in education we call PD, professional development, so that teachers are equipped with an understanding of how to approach this in the classroom. And then also they have the resources that will help them. So we have really useful resources that help them kind of follow a guide and help them through what it looks like to get kids sort of the right knowledge and understanding at the right time.
And was this a hard sell, so to speak? What did you hear from the teachers, pro and con, in terms of switching methods?
Yeah, I had a conversation with one of our most experienced teachers just last week about this journey, and what she said to me was, a few years ago, she would have expected that she would stand on the hill and defend sort of her position around balanced literacy to the very end, and but she's as teachers are, they're open-minded. They want to try new things. They want to do what works for their kids. She's come along on the journey with us, and she expressed to me that she sees it now. She can really see the benefits in the classroom, and that's all the teachers really, really want and need to convince them of something. Is this going to work for my students? Is this going to help them with something that we know is critically important, which is literacy? And so, yes, initially there was some challenges getting people to make the shift because, of course, for many years, teachers were trained and convinced or even directed to do things a different way. Mm-hmm. And so anytime you're asking a lot of teachers to change the way they practice, that can be a challenge, right? Teachers' lives are very busy. And so,
Yeah, and you set up your classroom a certain way to appeal to certain methods of learning and so on. But do you think the change that teachers are even more open to the change because there is so much empirical research now pointing that it is time to go more to a structured literacy model?
Yeah, I mean, I think as the voices grow around the research evidence around this, more and more people are interested, and we're certainly not alone in Manitoba. So I appreciate you calling us leaders on this, but there are other school divisions undertaking this work as well, and so yeah, the more that research becomes evident, and then the more that teachers see it in their own classroom with their own students, particularly students who might otherwise struggle, then they're convinced, right? I mean, the proof is in the pudding, as they speak, and as kids really make gains, it encourages us to continue.
And what's been the reception from parents?
Yeah, parents, I mean, you would have seen in the recent news article some responses from our parents about the difference that it's made for their children. And we had a parent present at one of our board meetings last year about the change in her child's trajectory once they were getting the supports that they needed in order to really build their foundational literacy skills. So, of course, what happens sometimes if kids don't learn those literacy skills early is they start to struggle with school as they move up the grades. And when kids struggle with school, sometimes they, get into sort of misbehavior or distracting activities that are certainly not to their benefit, nor are they to the benefit to others in the classroom. And so the scenario that this parent described was one where she could really see her child developing kind of a negative sense of himself as a learner, starting to get into a little bit of kind of low-level mischief at school, those kinds of things. But really, once the supports were in place and we saw a quick improvement in his reading, it really turned his trajectory around, right? You hear stories of, my child used to just toss the birthday cards aside, but now he's eager to read the birthday cards. And so this kind of thing, right? It's very encouraging when you can make such a difference for kids and how things are going to go for them, not just in school, but once they're, out in the world. As you know, literacy is a, key indicator of health and well-being and all manner of other social outcomes.
Well, we are going to continue to call you a leader in this, and you'll probably need your diplomacy as well as your literacy skills on this. But thank you very much for being with us on Radio Noon.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. That's Scott Hill. He is a superintendent of the Evergreen School Division in the Gimli area. And just now we have time for this little item. Canada has made a name for itself in the world of hip-hop, and a new exhibition in Toronto celebrates the evolution of the genre in our country. Phil Vassell is the executive director of the group behind it, the Canada Black Music Archives, and he gave the CBC's Samantha Louis a tour.
My name is Phil Vassell, and I'm the executive director of the Canada Black Music Archives. There is a lot of history here, and we wanted to give our audience at the City of Toronto Archives a sense as to the evolution of the hip-hop culture scene, which is pretty much a fundamental part of global hip-hop culture, and how that culture, which started up in the Bronx in New York City, has evolved, and how, the relationship between New York and Toronto grew over the years to the point where some of the biggest influences in rap music today, and I'm referring to Drake, I'm also referring to Cardinal Official, The Weeknd, Maestro. We have our own group of artists who have made a huge difference. Missy Me, the godmother of the hip-hop scene here, she was right there at the outset, but we've certainly been part of that sweep of the culture since the late 70s.
Is the nation's music station. Much music, 24 hours a day in stereo.
One of the points we wanted to make with this exhibition is the massive role that Much Music has played in exposing independent Torontonian rap artists, more specifically, to the nation. Commercial radio was not playing rap music. I think one of the breakthrough records was by Maestro Fresh West.
First offense.
That record was called Let Your Backbone Slide, and it became a massive multi-platinum selling hit. But that was not the norm, it was the exception. So to be able to showcase some of the stuff that was going on Much Music through Soul in the City, Rap City, Extendamix, that was massive.
Let your backbone slide.
I'm listening to you speak, and you are this encyclopedia of knowledge. What were your early beginnings falling in love with the music scene?
My early years began with my grandfather in Jamaica, who had, what we called a sound system. And I remember he had these 78s. And, he had this as a side hustle while operating a convenience store. I was exposed to a lot of music as a young person. My wife and I, Donna McCurvin, we started a magazine after spending 5 years working at CBC Television and decided, let's start this publication and see where it goes. Now that publication, Word Magazine, became the platform for a lot of black creatives in the city of Toronto. And we did that for 20 years. And so I was always having a front row seat.
Me, I tell her only partly. I only love my bed and my mom. I'm sorry.
We operate, or have been operating, the Canada Black Music Archives, which is a digital archives, over the last 5 years. And we realized that there really was no one speaking to the idea of developing a major hub as an archive to celebrate these musicians. A lot of them, once they passed, that was it. You never heard about them ever again. And that was a problem. And so we felt, what better way than to celebrate and honor these people than to have an archive that goes back 100 years plus, all the way from people like Nathaniel Dett, after whom the Nathaniel Dett Chorale was named in the mid-90s, up to the Drakes and the Hawaii Mighties of this world.
Yeah. I've been moving calm, don't start no trouble with me. Trying to keep it peaceful is a struggle for me. Don't pull up at 6 a.m. to cuddle with me. You know how I like it when you loving on me. I don't wanna die for them to miss me. Yes, I see the things that they wishing on me. Hope I got some brothers that outlive me. They gon' tell the story was different with me. God's plan, God's plan.
That's Drake with God's Plan. You're listening to Radio Noon. It's just 2 minutes before 1 o'clock. And coming up on Up to Speed this afternoon with host Faith Fundal, they'll be speaking with an author who's written a book all about managing modern misinformation, where you see it, hear it, or read it. And I've just got time to say thank you very much to our technical director, Dylan Longhurst, our director, Sierra Sanders, our producer, Wendy Parker, and our YouTube live stream director, Kevin Nipatebo. I'm Lori Hugh-Stratton. It's been lovely spending a little time with you. I'll talk to you again on Friday. In the meantime, Friday says it's going to be warm later, a little later. Really cold tonight, but creeping up there. So wear your parka, get your vitamin D out of that little oval of your face, what sticks out of your parka today, and frostbite occurs in minutes. Take care. Have a good day. See you later. Bye.